The last section of fallacies that we'll look at are fallacies of presumption, ambiguity, and grammatical analogy. The first of these is begging the question, which you may have heard of before. This is an argument in which, or the fallacy is committed when the arguer creates the illusion that inadequate premises are providing adequate support for the conclusion. They could be leaving out a possibly false or leaving out a key premise. They could restate the conclusion as a premise, or they could reason in a circle. Any one of these could be a case of begging the question. So the first and most common way is by leaving out a possibly false key premise. So if I said murder is morally wrong, this being the case, it follows that abortion is morally wrong. It begs the question, how do you know that abortion is a form of murder? So in other words, just saying that murder is wrong and therefore abortion is wrong, you haven't made any connection between abortion and murder. So a key premise that someone believes that abortion is murder has been left out. Another way to commit this fallacy is to repeat the conclusion as a premise. So if I said anyone who preaches revolution has a vision of the future, for the simple reason that if a person has no vision of the future, he cannot possibly preach revolution. So you can't justify one conclusion with itself. The question that is begged, right? Request for the source is the Latin name. How do you know that people who preach revolution really do have a vision of the future? That's the question that is being begged there. So watch out for that in your own writing. The last way that it could be committed is by reasoning in a circle. This one's probably the easiest to identify. If I said Verizon has the best cell phone service, after all, their phones have the clearest sound. And we know this is so because customers hear better on Verizon phones. And this follows from the fact that Verizon has digital technology. But this is exactly what you would expect given that Verizon has the best cell phone service. So we're inclined to ask, where does the reasoning begin? What is its source? It's just reasoning in a circle. It basically says Verizon is the best cell phone service because it has the best cell phone service, right? So it's really just a restatement of itself in the sense that it's reasoning in a circle. So that's begging the question. A complex question, which, by the way, here's a big hint, is always an actual question. It uses a question. It's really several questions disguised or concealed as a single question. So if I said, have you stopped cheating on your exams? You might have to think for a minute before answering, because you would say, well, hang on. If I say yes, then that means I have been cheating on my exams. And if I say no, then it means that I have been cheating on my exams and I haven't stopped. So it's really two questions. One, have you stopped cheating on your exams? And if so, or did you cheat on your exams in the past? And if you did cheat in the past, have you stopped now? Right? Or if someone said, where did you hide the marijuana you were smoking? They're really asking, A, were you smoking marijuana? And B, if you were smoking it, where did you hide it? But it's hard. They're trying to trick you by asking you one question that really conceals multiple questions. Number 17 is a false dichotomy. It's committed when a disjunctive, or in other words, an either or choice is being presented, and the arguer presents two unlikely alternatives if they're the only alternatives. Then they remove the obviously undesirable one, leaving you to accept their conclusion. So, for example, either you let me attend the, I don't know, Drake concert, or I'll be miserable for the rest of my life. I know you don't want me to be miserable for the rest of my life, so it follows that you'll let me attend the concert. So are attending the concert and being miserable for the rest of your life the only two options? No, but they're being presented as the only two options, and then the undesirable one, the one that you'll be miserable for the rest of your life, is removed. and they're trying to trick you into accepting the other conclusion, the other part of the either or. Here's another example. Either you use UltraGuard deodorant or you risk the chance of perspiration odor. Surely you don't want to risk the chance of perspiration odor. Therefore, you will want to use UltraGuard deodorant. Now, do you have to use UltraGuard deodorant? Is that the only option? No, there are tons of other types of deodorant that you could use. UltraGuard, I don't even know if that's a real brand. So a choice is given. They're telling you there's only two alternatives. One of them is bad, so you have to accept this one, but it's just a trick. So that argument contains a fallacy. Okay, number 18, the fallacy of suppressed evidence, where an arguer is ignoring important evidence that would require a different conclusion if you knew it. So if I said, for example, most dogs are friendly and pose no threat to people who pet them, therefore it would be safe to pet the little dog that is approaching us now, and I left out the fact that the little dog is excited and foaming at the mouth, suggesting rabies, then I would be suppressing some evidence. Nearly every advertisement that you see neglects to mention certain negative features of the product advertised because they're advertising a product. They want to only tell you good things. So as a result, an observer who sees or hears an advertisement and draws a conclusion might commit the fallacy of suppressed evidence. Here's my favorite example of a fallacy out of all of them. If I said the ad for Kentucky Fried Chicken says, quote, buy a bucket of chicken and have a barrel of fun. Therefore, if we buy a bucket of that chicken, we will be guaranteed to have lots of fun. So you may not see it immediately, but the idea is that the fun does not come packaged with the chicken. You don't just open up the chicken and the entity of fun comes out, right? And makes you have fun. The fun has to be supplied by you, the person who is the buyer. And the authors of your textbook mention, of course, the ad also fails to state that the chicken is loaded with fat and that your resultant weight gain may not amount to a barrel of fun, or I don't know, maybe your stomach might be upset by the level of preservatives or grease or whatever it is. But the fun is provided by you, not by the bucket of chicken, is the point. Also, if you ignored important events that had occurred with the passage of time, for instance, if you said, during the past 60 years, Poland has enjoyed a rather low standard of living. Therefore, it will probably have a low standard of living for the next 60 years. Sure, that might be a good argument to make if Poland was still part of the Soviet bloc, which it was for many, many years. So because that historical fact has changed, it would be suppressed evidence. Okay, moving on to equivocation. Think about equivocation as words that are exactly the same, but they're being used in a different way than was meant by the arguer. So look, if I said some triangles are obtuse, whatever is obtuse is ignorant. Therefore, some triangles are ignorant. Well, we know that the word obtuse means in geometry something very different than it means when we're talking about people. If you call someone obtuse, then you're saying, oh, are you being purposely obtuse? That means, are you being purposely ignorant? Are you purposely behaving as if you don't know what's going on? No, that's very different than saying, hey, are you behaving as if you have an angle that's greater than 90 degrees? So it's very different, right? So in the first premise, it describes a kind of angle, and in the second, it means dull or stupid. So when you see a word being used in two different ways, look out for that equivocation. They're trying to make those two meanings equal when they are not. Okay, amphibole. Now it's a weird name, but when you think of amphibole, think ambiguous. Right? We usually say it ambiguous, but amphibole, ambiguous. Wherein this fallacy occurs when the arguer misinterprets an ambiguous statement, meaning a statement that could be interpreted in more than one way, and draws a faulty conclusion based on that interpretation. So it could be because of a missing comma, something like that. If you remember, there was a book that was called eats, shoots, and leaves. That's without the proper punctuation, this is a very ambiguous statement. Does it mean that someone ate something, shot something, and went away? Or does it mean eats, shoots, and leaves, as in what does a panda bear do? Well, it eats the shoots and leaves of the bamboo. So this is an ambiguous statement. But if I said, oh, someone ate a meal and shot someone with an arrow and then left, I would be misinterpreting that. It would be an incorrect interpretation of an ambiguous statement made by someone or other than the arguer. Here's another one. John told Henry that he had made a mistake. It follows that John has at least the courage to admit his own mistakes. But we don't know, what does John told Henry that he had made a mistake mean? Does it mean that John told Henry that Henry made a mistake? Probably. Is it more likely that it means that John told Henry that John made it? Probably not. Here's an even better example. If I said Professor Johnson said that he will give a lecture about heart failure in the biology lecture hall, it must be the case that a number of heart failures have occurred there recently. No, if Professor Johnson says he's going to give a lecture about heart failure in the biology lecture hall, he probably means, or she probably means, or they probably mean that they are going to give a lecture about heart failure, and that lecture is going to occur in the biology lecture hall. Not that they're going to give a lecture about the heart failures that have occurred in the biology lecture hall. So again, it's a statement that could be, that's ambiguous, that's misinterpreted. Okay. And then the last two relate to one another when we're talking about composition and division. So composition, the fallacy of composition occurs when an attribute or quality of something is incorrectly transferred or wrongly transferred from the parts to the whole. It's when you say the parts are this way, therefore the whole must be this way. So for example, if I said sodium and chloride are both poisonous substances, therefore NaCl, or table salt, must also be a poisonous substance, that would be incorrect, because even though sodium and chlorine are separately poisonous substances, table salt is not. I mean, unless you have high blood pressure, I suppose. So it's incorrectly saying that because the parts are a certain way, the whole is a certain way. But division is the opposite. So be careful not to get them confused. This is where an attribute is incorrectly transferred from the whole to the parts. So if I said in the opposite way that NaCl, sodium chloride, or table salt, is not a poisonous substance, therefore sodium and chlorine are not poisonous substances, I would be taking an attribute of the whole and incorrectly applying it to the parts. Okay? So composition, parts to whole incorrectly, and division, whole to parts incorrectly. And those are the fallacies of presumption, ambiguity, and grammatical analogy.